Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We seem to have quite a terrific turnout, and we look forward to a great webinar with lots of very practical steps for you all. My name is Rusmir Music, and I am the Business Development Lead for the EDGE Green Buildings Market Transformation Program. EDGE is an innovation of IFC, a member of the World Bank Group focused on private sector investments. And with me is my very good colleague, Eleni, from the consortium of SGS and Sintali.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, hello. A few logistics notes. This webinar is being recorded. Materials will be shared in a few hours once the system generates the recording. During the webinar, as we mentioned, please use the Q&A feature to ask any questions. I will serve as your host, and I will moderate the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. At the end of our presentation, before we turn to questions, we'll ask you to help fill out our feedback survey, which helps us improve our delivery. Our agenda today includes several main sections. We will take a look into the market for green buildings, including estimating the investment opportunity and the business case for both the banks and developers working in this space. IFC has covered these topics in detail elsewhere, and we'll make sure to point you to the right resources if you have not yet seen our introductory presentations. We will then move on to how to create a green real estate investment program before focusing in on how technical assistance can be a good starting point and what options you have with Sintali and SGS. Finally, we will show these case studies of how banks have already implemented technical assistance. At the end, there will be time for Q&A, but we encourage you to share your questions at any point during the webinar in the Q&A feature of WebEx. It's important to evaluate why launching a green real estate program makes sense. We know that climate change cannot be solved without tackling buildings. Urbanization pressures mean that large portions of the population are moving into cities, rapidly growing in emerging markets. Today's buildings generate 20% of energy-related GHG emissions, but according to the IPCC report on climate, by 2030, all new buildings must be zero carbon, and all buildings, new and old, must be zero carbon by 2050. We only have a few years to change the paradigm. At the same time, 80% of viable potential is untapped, even though technical solutions exist today. The great news is that green buildings are not just a challenge, they are an investment opportunity. The floor area of the building sector is expected to double by 2060. Green buildings comprise a relatively small share of global construction today, but the market is expected to grow at an average of over 10% annually between now and 2030. As the understanding of green buildings options improves, the investment opportunity for green buildings represents a staggering $24.7 trillion globally. This is the single largest climate sector that the banks can tackle today. Why such a big number? It's because buildings are being built as we speak. Developers know how to build them, and banks know how to finance them. We, from IFC and SGS Sintali, as well as our network of partners, can show you how easy it is to turn this investment flow from brown to green. And again, there's quite a huge opportunity for you here. In the US, it has been proven that green buildings ensure lower investment risk for the financing of both developers and home buyers. IFC is developing evidence program to explore this in emerging markets as well. There's the opportunity to become a market leader and gain greater market share. As a bank, you will also earn enhanced brand reputation as an innovative and socially responsible bank. After the Paris Climate Agreement, many international investors are looking for quality green projects. The UN tracks over 11,000 investors who have committed to climate action in green buildings. This provides the opportunity to diversify your funder base and to tap institutional investors through new platforms such as green bonds. Your developers will also enjoy a number of benefits. They'll be positioned as first movers in the market with a marketing and communications push supported by IFC. Through EDGE, developers associate their brands with the World Bank Group, and this differentiation can lead to higher prices or quicker sales, particularly in a crowded market. And again, we have these case studies elsewhere. Developers can enjoy the easy-to-use EDGE online certification process, which serves them every step of the way from A to Z. Because of these reasons, IFC created our market creation program for green buildings. This is a systematic approach to sustainable building in a four-part strategy that includes working with banks, investing directly into the building sector, advising governments on green building codes and incentives, and the EDGE certification program. You can see here some of our results. In total, IFC has already invested $6.4 billion in green buildings, split between direct finance and that through other financial institutions such as banks and funds. Through our EDGE program, we have certified almost 15 million meters square of space in a program which now has a global reach. And we have helped 10 countries and many other municipalities on green building codes and incentives. You can see that IFC does green buildings because it's good business for us. IFC's offer ranges from broad market creation efforts, working through specific types of advice, and finally, investment. We have differentiated offers for developers, for investors, and for governments. You will see at the end of this webinar a call to action to connect with IFC, so we may deploy these in one-on-one interactions with you. We're very much interested in investing if your mission is in emerging markets, where we can deploy a range of advice and market creation activities around the world. In addition to our broad global program, we have a special program called MAGIC, Market Accelerator for Green Construction, which has been generously supported by the UK government. You can see the geographic scope of this program, which becomes available once the bank signs for IFC financing. The program is exclusively through other financial institutions. So in addition to financing, there is a free offer for technical assistance to both the bank and the developer, as well as a range of risk mitigation and performance-based instruments through what we call blended concessional finance. If you are a bank in these focus countries and you're interested in financing, reach out to me. My information is at the end of this webinar, and I will connect you with our investment officers in those particular countries. Whether or not this special MAGIC program is available, IFC has helped many investors and many developers launch innovative financial products. Let's run just through a few case studies as an introduction. With green construction finance, the focus is, of course, on developers. Then we have helped banks such as HSBC, ProCredit Bank in both Latin America and Europe, and funds such as Asia Green Real Estate. Green mortgages and leases allow you to cross-sell with construction finance, such as Bancolombia, APSA, and the fund International Housing Solutions has done. In capital markets, you can raise a green bond to finance a new portfolio of green buildings, as well as a new sister instrument called the green loans. Once you have a stock of certified buildings, you can securitize them as collateral, as the green certificate provides the same standard that will enable securitization. Many first green bonds in countries such as Kenya, Colombia, and even in the Philippines were done for green buildings. Again, the case studies of these programs are available from our previously launched webinars. Now that you know a bit about why a green building investing, I'll turn it over to Eleni to discuss the how. Eleni, go ahead.
Thanks, Rusmir. So I think the business case is really interesting, and Rusmir's done a really good job of highlighting the why. So let's get into some of the tangible details of how you can get involved, how to get started, and how we at Sintali-SGS work with investors around the world to really help deploy capital into the green building market. So the first step, of course, is the EDGE certificate. And this is the bread and butter of this conversation. And hopefully you're all familiar and excited about the power of EDGE. But using the EDGE certificate in financing is incredibly powerful and can really help in a variety of different ways. One of the most credible things about it is that it really simplifies compliance. So the certificate really takes the responsibility away from the bank of having to check technical details of the project and having to go really into the nitty-gritty in areas where perhaps there isn't the expertise or the resources. And instead, it shifts that responsibility to a third party that really does the verification and ensures that your projects are complying with the requirements and the eligibility. And it's really helpful in the areas of greenwashing, where we live in a time where green can mean so many different things to so many different people. Really having a standard that's being followed and verified through a third party can be incredibly helpful for banks. And what's even better about it is that it's available in so many different countries that it can allow the bank to deploy a standardized approach that's comparable across a variety of different markets. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into the case studies. But this standard and comparable approach can be really helpful when you're looking at launching this green real estate program, perhaps in multiple different markets that the bank operates in. Another thing to note about the EDGE certificate is that when it comes to residential projects, each unit receives its own green certificate, which can then be used for green mortgages. So really, it's quite a flexible tool that can be deployed within a green real estate program. Now, launching a green real estate program requires a variety of different components, all the way from looking around the education and incentives to the loan agreements to the technical assistance, all the way through to impact reporting. There's a lot to cover, and today we are just going to look at the technical assistance to developers. But IFC has done other workshops, and of course, there's always opportunity for further conversation. And as Rusmir mentioned, please do reach out if you would like to look at covering some of these topics in more detail. But today, let's look at the technical assistance of launching green real estate programs. Technical assistance can mean different things to different people. So we're just going to break it down a little bit into the areas that we think of when we look at technical assistance. So on the first level, there's technical assistance on a bank level. And as Rusmir mentioned, IFC offers this support, particularly around the magic funding, but also more broadly. And technical assistance on a bank level is really training on EDGE for the bank, for its employees, through workshops and technical trainings to really understand how EDGE works, really build up the internal capacity and figure out exactly how EDGE can be integrated into existing financial processes. The second layer is the client level, so that technical assistance for developers, for the bank's clients, whether they're SMEs or large organizations, developers or owners occupiers. That kind of training is similar in the sense of you're still building capacity, we're still running workshops and technical trainings, but really helping the bank's clients and developers get up to speed on EDGE and the EDGE certification process. Third layer is for the actual certification process. And this is really where Sintali-SGS comes in, although we help across all the other categories as well. But that's really the technical support and the technical assistance of getting through the certification process. And this is delivered both by us, but also in partnership with our partner network of EDGE experts. And EDGE experts are simply consultants that are trained on EDGE, that have specialization either as engineers or architects or designers, and can really get into the nitty-gritty of green buildings and provide the advice to help really make sure the building is as efficient as possible. So we work with a partner network of them, and alongside them help the bank's clients really get through the certification process and support them step by step along the way. The final element of technical assistance is impact reporting. So green buildings are great, but you have to be able to report what is the impact, how are you helping to meet the Paris Agreement, how are you helping to decarbonize your investments and move towards green finance and green lending, in which case the EDGE application is really powerful because it gives you your carbon savings, but there are plenty of other tools as well to help you really report your impact and show and prove the work that you're doing. And we'll get into those tools a little bit at the end as well. So hold on to that thought. Now, if we hone in on the technical assistance to developers, so that's really the education, and the assistance during the certification process. There's 4 different ways of going about technical assistance. One, as we mentioned, is through the IFC advisory, so working with IFC, and they'll provide an all-inclusive package, and that's something that you can happily talk to Rusmir more about. The second is looking at independently hiring experts or consultants in the region that can help. The difficulty with that is if you have multiple programs, it can be time consuming to just hire independent consultants in multiple ways, but it works quite well in certain regions and is absolutely an option that is available. The third is building in-house technical expertise. So if we think about the previous slide around the building the internal capacity within the bank, you can get employees of the bank to get trained up on EDGE and act as that EDGE expert, act as that technical consultant internally and support clients along the way. Again, that's been implemented in multiple banks around the world and can be really successful. From that side, it's simply a matter of where you want to build the resources and the capacity and what makes most sense for your clients and for the service that you want to deliver for them. And the final area, which is what we're going to hone in on today, is this master technical agreement with Sintali-SGS. And we'll give you a couple of case studies once we've explained a little bit more about it. But essentially, on a high level, the investor, the bank, works with Sintali-SGS, and we as an entity support the clients through the certification process. I'm sorry, I really hope you can't hear this, but there's somebody cutting a tree outside of my window, and I hope it's not too disruptive, but Rusmir will let me know if it is. Within this master technical agreement, we work alongside your clients to get through the certification process and deliver the EDGE certificate as compliance for the loan and for being able to distribute the financing, whether it's a loan or a mortgage. We work alongside the clients to help get that, and we offer the EDGE expert consultancy as part of this package. Now, before I get too much into the detail, I do want to take a step back and just quickly introduce Sintali-SGS, if you're not familiar with us. So Sintali and SGS are 2 separate companies, and we work together through a consortium to deliver what we call a one-stop shop for EDGE certification and audit. So collectively, we have offices around the world and over 20 years of experience in the green building industry. And our value is really that we integrate everything that you need together to make the process as simple and straightforward as possible, because we know it can be difficult and time consuming to have multiple contractors, multiple suppliers be working around the world, and trying to do this in a streamlined way can really be beneficial. So we offer a single contract on behalf of all entities that includes everything needed for the EDGE certification. So that's the audit fees, the certification fees, the registration, as well as a basic consultancy package from our partner network. And that's actually included at no additional cost to the client for a basic support. And then we also offer a range of additional consultancy packages depending on what the client needs. Now, in terms of the master technical agreement and how it works on a high level, we work with investors and sign a memorandum of understanding or a master technical framework, just clarifying the collaboration that we have with investors, any incentives that might be offered or any additional benefits that we've discussed, and agreeing on the process of workflow. So really looking at how the work will go between the investor, between the different entities, between the client, and just laying out a step-by-step workflow. In its absolute simplest form, there is no money exchanged between the investor and Sintali-SGS. We do have a couple of examples where that is in place and that is an option, which we'll discuss when we get to the case studies, but it's not a required component of working together. We contract directly with the bank's clients for the EDGE certification and audit processes. So the memorandum of understanding, or the technical agreement, if you will, is more of a referral agreement and more of an agreement of the process and a way of working together to really help the bank, help the investor streamline the approach of deploying funds into the green building sector. Now, the first step of any green building program is really looking at the pipeline. So making sure that there are projects and potential projects to look into financing. And that's really delivered through this education element for developers on how to use the EDGE system and how to be able to start green projects. So the World Bank, IFC, and us work together with the bank to create these workshops, to send out invitations to developers, to get technical teams together and really help educate them and provide them with the information they need to start using EDGE and to start realizing opportunities and projects that they could look for financing to help create a good pipeline. IFC did a developer workshop with Banco Pichincha in Ecuador. They did a series of events and they generated over 100 projects that ended up looking for financing. So it's quite a simple event, but it really can have a huge impact and help to create lots of interest and drive these green real estate programs. Because at the end of the day, if you have a green real estate program, but you don't have any projects, it's not going to be very successful. So the education, the awareness building, the marketing is a really important component to help pair with a green real estate financing program to help it be successful. Now, whilst these workshops are happening and there's interest being generated, alongside that, Sintali-SGS works with the bank to really find out where to integrate EDGE into the existing processes and how to create a comprehensive workflow that makes sense for all parties. Now, typically, financing flows in 3 different steps. This is very generalized, this is very high level, but for the sake of argument, bear with me. There's a step 1, which is some form of application, where the client is expressing interest in accessing green financing in some way or other. And there's another step, which is the review of the financing request. So the bank is reviewing a set of information, doing some kind of due diligence, and making a decision about whether to approve the financing or not. And then there's a third step around the distribution and reporting phase, where the money is being distributed following a positive acceptance of the request, and the bank then needs to report on the impact. Now, from the Sintali-SGS side, we work with investors to adapt our process to your existing internal processes and find a way to reduce the workload for bank employees and really standardize the process with EDGE. There are different deliverables that come out of EDGE that can be used at different stages of the process. So one of the things that we aim to understand is how the different outputs can be integrated into your workflow and what kind of information and level of confidence do you need at what stage in time to really match EDGE, to match the deliverables and outputs that are coming out with what you need throughout the process. So on a very basic and fast level, the EDGE app means that a client can go in, use it at any point in time for free to conduct a self-assessment and give the bank an idea of the carbon impact of the new project and of the projected efficiency savings. This can be done at any point with 0 effort or investment, if you will, but it does come with a high level of risk because the client might not be familiar with the EDGE app, they might make false assumptions or give incorrect results, so the bank wouldn't have a full level of assurance that the information they're receiving is accurate. Which brings us to step 2. You could look at using a self-assessment alongside an EDGE expert. So it's still the same idea, it's still a self-declaration, but you have somebody there who can help the client go through the EDGE process, who has a higher level of technical expertise and can at least act as some level of confidence that the EDGE app has been used correctly and everything put in has been put in correctly, to give you a little bit more level of confidence and an idea that the initial results might be more likely accurate. We then move into the third step. So there's 2 levels of certification with EDGE. There's the preliminary certification and the final certification. The preliminary certification is based on the design information. And so it has documentation in there around the design, and it is going through a design audit and it goes through a certification process. And so the bank can use a preliminary certificate with decent confidence that this project is going to meet a specific set of savings because it's gone through the third-party validation, and there's proof that it's likely to be built in that specific way. Now, in the final stage, we have the final certificate, and that happens after a site audit. So the building has been built, we've done the documentation check, everything's been submitted, and following that, it goes through the certification. So there's proof at that point in time that the project has been built, the savings have actually been met, and then you have this final certificate again. That, of course, is the ultimate confidence that the project is as it says it is. But you don't necessarily have to wait for the final certificate to release the funds. Again, it depends on how your process is and how you could integrate parts of these deliverables throughout the process, depending on the level that you require. Now, a little bit more about the certification process, just so you can have a clear understanding of how it all works. A developer or a project owner would submit the project for registration and start the process for the preliminary certificate. And again, this is where this design audit's happening. It's the design of the project. If it's an existing building, you'd be still looking at putting that information in, but you wouldn't be going for that preliminary certification because the building already exists. So you'd just be using the EDGE application to show the improvements being made and going for post-construction. But assuming it's a new building or a new design, you're going through this design process, there's an audit happening, there's a preliminary certification, that's where the deliverable part 1 comes. And then once the building is built and as construction has happened, the site visit has happened, the post-construction review has happened, that's where you get that final certificate. And there are actually 3 levels of certificates to get. I think this is worth noting at a time where we're talking a lot about net zero carbon. There's EDGE certified certificates, which happen and are the 20% improvements across all categories for EDGE certified, and a 40% improvement on energy, which gives you the EDGE advanced certificate. And then finally, there's the EDGE zero carbon accreditation, which is looking at the operational carbon savings. And to reach zero carbon, a building must have reached EDGE advanced, so it must be at least 40% more energy efficient, and then be looking for on-site, off-site renewable energy, green procurements, and ultimately certified offsets. And that can only happen at least a year after full occupancy of the building, because it's based on operational data. And so the building must be operating and have that energy data for at least a year. But if you have financing around helping to make that transition to net zero, you could be looking at using the different EDGE certificates throughout the process to release different financing. So you could have one backstop within the EDGE certificate or the EDGE advanced, and then another backstop once the building is fully zero carbon accredited. We can talk about that in the Q&A if that's of interest. Now, moving on to the specific process. This is still a general flowchart, but it gives you an idea of where we could plug in the EDGE process and the different outputs that I've mentioned within the financing process to help streamline the financing flow from the investor side. So we talked about the application stage. There's a client that has interest. The investor role in this particular process would be to notify Sintali-SGS of the potential project. And in this case, we are assuming that no money is shifting between the investor and Sintali-SGS. So we just have a master technical agreement and we are contracting directly with the client. So the investor notifies Sintali-SGS of the potential project. And in this case, we've decided that the investor would like the client to conduct a self-assessment using the EDGE application as part of the loan application process, but they would like it to be done alongside an EDGE expert. This is where we come in as Sintali-SGS, and through our partner network would offer an EDGE expert service to the client to help them conduct this initial EDGE assessment. And so we get the information from the client, from the investor, we partner the client with one of our EDGE experts, and the client works with the EDGE expert to put some initial information into the EDGE application and conduct an assessment to see how their building would do in terms of efficiency savings, and if they would then qualify for the green financing. We then move on to stage 2. In stage 2, the investor is reviewing the output from EDGE, so the EDGE assessment that the client's done with the EDGE expert, and conducting whatever other due diligence needs to happen to decide whether to approve the financing and what terms to set. Now, assuming there's a positive outcome, that's where the investor tells the client, yes, and now you must go into the EDGE certification process, start the process, and give me a deliverable of an EDGE certificate. And again, that's where Sintali-SGS comes in. We work with the client, we sign the certification agreement directly with the client, and we start the EDGE certification process. We work alongside the client. We also have our EDGE experts still involved to really help take the client through a step-by-step process to ensure that all the information is correct. And then we go through the audit process and deliver the certificate. Now, again, if we move on to the distribution phase, this could be the preliminary certificate, so in the design stage, or it could be the final certificate, which is the post-construction certificate, depending on what the investor needs. But once the process is finished and that certificate is ready to go, we at Sintali-SGS send the certificate to the client, and we also send the certificate to the investor. And the investor can use that certificate for distribution of the financing and then to start the impact reporting. And again, we'll go more into the impact reporting in a little bit, but that certificate has valuable information on it and data that can be used directly for impact reporting, which can save so much time and really help streamline the process for investors instead of having somebody needing to do a whole lot of calculations about the carbon impact, the carbon savings, etc., to go into a report. On top of the benefits of having an EDGE certificate and being able to access financing, the clients will also get extended marketing support for going through the EDGE certification. So IFC has a host of different benefits and marketing support to help clients really maximize what they're doing. So there really is added value for the developers and for the clients going through the EDGE certification process beyond the benefit to the investor of having a standardized approach. Now, we talked about this master technical agreement being the base and that there's no money transactions, and on a really basic level, all it is a memorandum of understanding between an investor and Sintali-SGS. However, we found that incentives can really help catalyze the market. So if you are interested in launching a green real estate program, it is something to consider and really understand what incentive could you offer if you have the capacity to help drive the market. Because unfortunately, while not true, developers continue to believe that green buildings are more costly than conventional buildings and don't bring as many benefits. And so there's still a need to really help them understand and move forward and really drive the market through incentives. Now, there's many different incentives that can be provided, from supplying free EDGE expert support. So for example, if you're using the EDGE expert in that initial stage and you want to offer that for free to the client, that's a really nice incentive that could help, again, lower the barrier of entry for developers. Other kinds of incentives are longer grace periods, longer tenors for the financing, or subsidizing the EDGE certification cost, smaller front-end fee, lowest interest rates. There's so many different ways that incentives can be packaged. And we'll give you a couple of examples, but it's really helpful. And from what we've spoken to investors and we've really tried to hone in on, why would a bank offer an incentive? It's really helping to capture greater market share and really help to be positioned as a market leader. So sometimes even a small investment in an incentive, even if it's the simplest form of incentive you could think of, can really make a big difference. And particularly for starting green building programs and in markets where perhaps there aren't that many, of the market isn't quite mature yet. There are lots of different banks around the world that are offering incentives from pro credit that's offering lower interest rates, all the way through to Banco Pichincha in Ecuador that's offering technical assistance and free certification. You can find all of these resources on the EDGE Buildings website, and you can take a look. Highly recommend. It's got different ideas and different ways in which it's being implemented. But we've definitely seen high success where an incentive is paired with technical agreement. However, it's not necessary. And so what we would say is everybody can start with a technical agreement, master framework to get a green real estate program launched. And then if you're able to, or if you start to see success, you can add on incentives, or to help start the program, you can add an incentive. It's not necessary. And I know Rusmir will talk about it at the end. It's about finding what works for you as a bank, what your capacity is, what your resources are, and really just getting started. And you can always build the program out as time goes on. In terms of our proof of concept, we wanted to share a couple of case studies with you about the Global Climate Partnership Fund and ProCredit Kosovo. I'll start with the Global Climate Partnership Fund. So we work with GCPF for short, and we launched the program a little over a year ago. And GCPF is essentially supporting the growth of financing through partner institutions. And so they do not directly finance projects, but they are supporting their financial institution partners around the world. And they work a lot in Latin America and Asia and Africa to help them build their technical assistance and their capacity to offer green financing. So they're helping them structure products, and they're also offering an incentive to help drive the green buildings within those markets by covering 100% of the audit and the EDGE expert fees. In some cases, they'll even cover the certification fees, but that's dependent on approval from their board. And the reason they do that is to really help catalyze the market. And one of the big drivers for GCPF using EDGE was actually something that I mentioned earlier, and it was this idea of standardization. So GCPF, before integrating EDGE, was using local consultants around the world. And again, they're working across multiple different markets. So they were using consultants to calculate local baselines, to understand whether projects were meeting that 20% energy efficiency improvement as compared to a local baseline, and doing that in a way that was very manual and very difficult to compare. Because if you have one consultant in Ecuador and one consultant in Myanmar, and having that data and having those calculations happening on a very local level, it was very, very hard to compare. And of course, on top of that, to get the impact data. And so EDGE has completely streamlined that process, because now they use EDGE behind the scenes within the database is doing that modeling for them. It's being able to do that percentage comparison. It's doing it very quickly, very efficiently, streamlining the workflow, and also getting the carbon savings out of the EDGE app directly, and so helping on the impact reporting as well. And the incentive that they're offering is really helping to get that barrier of entry as low as possible to ensure that projects are happening, particularly projects where green buildings aren't very common in markets that aren't very mature, and really helping to drive growth. That's been a really great example of having a master technical agreement with us, but then also that additional incentive. So GCPF is actually an example where we do have money transacting between Sintali-SGS and GCPF, because they are covering the audit and EDGE expert fees. And the last thing about GCPF is that they realize that their clients, so that the institution's clients, this is 2 layers removed, wanted 2 different options of EDGE expert support. So there was a basic one, which is about 8 hours of consultancy. And then there's the extended one, because in reality, there's always clients out there that want the financing, that want to do green buildings, but don't want to and don't have the capacity to do the work for it. And so there's an extended support package for clients where the EDGE expert does the majority of the assessments, the green buildings analysis, etc., to really reduce the workload. And that's also an interesting concept that we can work with investors on to understand and put together special packages of consultancy to really meet the client needs and to really adapt to the specific market that you're working in. Now, our second example is ProCredit Kosovo. And this is actually a pilot program that is being launched quite literally as we speak, and hopefully will be rolled out across the ProCredit Group portfolio shortly after. Within the ProCredit Kosovo example, this is the pure technical agreement, again, between ourselves and the bank. So we have a memorandum of understanding that states out the specific workflows, it states how we're working together, but there's no money being transacting between ourselves and the bank. Instead, what we've put together is a package of incentives to really help drive the market within Kosovo. So Kosovo is quite a young market for green buildings. And so what we discussed with the bank and really worked on was understanding how could we lay the foundations to really drive growth in a market where belief in green buildings was still tentative. And so it came through a couple of different ways. ProCredit Kosovo is actually offering a 0.5% preferential loan to all clients going for this financing. And what they've done on the background is the preliminary certificate, so at that design stage, is what is used for the distribution of the financing. And then in the loan agreement, they actually have a clause that says if the final certification doesn't come through, they can change the loan rate. And so that's that incentive to say, we're giving you the money at the design stage, but if this isn't seen through to the end, and if you change your mind and construct it very differently, you lose that incentive. And that's really powerful. And then as an added benefit, Sintali and SGS have put together a package of incentives as well to work alongside ProCredit Kosovo. So we give a discount on the audit services for all clients going through ProCredit financing. We also offer free EDGE expert support at the early stage. So at the application, that getting that initial EDGE assessment is done for free by our partner network of consultants. And we also have an incentive in the beginning to get the first few projects registered for free in Kosovo. Lots of different incentives, lots of packages there, but really looking at understanding the market and being able to cater something that really meets the needs and helps drive growth. And I think that's my key message before I pass on back to Rusmir for a few more details. But you know, there's the master technical agreement, which is standardized, and it's simply about working together and finding a good workflow and integrating EDGE into your financing processes in a simple, streamlined, scalable, comparable way. But then there's a whole range of other ways we can work together to really come up with an interesting package that is appealing to your developers and can really help the green finance program succeed. And that's something that we can do on a one-on-one basis. So if any of this sounds interesting, please do reach out and we'll be happy to have a conversation and see how we can work together and put something that makes sense for your clients. Now I'll pass it back on to Rusmir for some additional resources.
Thanks, Eleni. That was a really great, I think, very practical presentation, which is one of the things that we are trying to do with EDGE. There has been a lot of really interesting questions, and maybe I'll answer a few of them before we go forward. One of the main questions is, why are banks doing this? Why is SGS and Sintali doing this? Because it makes good business. All of the investors we've talked about that have launched these incentives, they've said, you know, this was an investment in a new program for us, and it has paid off. For Bancolombia, one of the examples that we gave through IFC, it was a $400 million program. We think that all of the other ones can really grow to that scale. GCPF was a finalist for the Financial Times Transformational Business Award, so incredible marketing that they received. So if you work with us, we really think that we can help you out. One of the important features of EDGE, as Eleni mentioned, is that we do connect developers and investors. And the way that we do that is to share information from the EDGE software on projects that are looking for financing. And we send this list of relevant contacts from the bank. That's how we were able, as we mentioned in Peru, to find out that there were already 100 projects looking for financing, and we can play that role of a matchmaker between the bank and the developer if that developer is not already in your network. The EDGE app, as Eleni mentioned, creates impact data for both individual projects and on a portfolio basis. You're seeing here just a screenshot of lots of my test projects, but this will be done on your particular basis. And you just need to instruct your developers to sort of share that information with you through the EDGE app. One of our investor clients developed one email where all the projects were going to. So it can be edge at bank.com. And of course, IFC can assist you with the reporting process if you share with us any project information. One of the tools that we have, it's called CAFI, which goes beyond green buildings to help you with data reporting across all the sector. The CAFI tool helps you assess eligibility for climate finance, can calculate expected impacts of a project, not just green buildings, but solar, waste, all of the sectors covered by climate. And then it can provide portfolio reports for both internal and external reporting. That way, if you're working on loans that have a combination of sectors, you'll be able to easily report all your portfolio regardless of the underlying sector. And again, if this is something you're interested in, reach out to me and I will connect you with the relevant people running the CAFI program. We're very conscious that today we showed you a very specific part of the entire offering available from IFC and from SGS and Sintali. I saw questions from our colleague Philippe asking, is EDGE covering new or existing buildings? What is the benchmark to calculate savings? All of that information is available, and the best place to start is our YouTube pages. So I'm giving you a screenshot of our YouTube channel. And again, we'll send you the link to that. Here, you'll see some of the other webinars that are introducing EDGE, kind of going a little bit behind, and a lot more information. For example, one of the webinars that we did was on Asia. We have a lot of resources for Latin America, Africa. We've done webinars with the Climate Bonds Initiative, talking about green bonds. So there's a lot more information available from our YouTube channel if you need to sort of start one layer before. If you're ready to get started, oops, I think we have an animation. If you're ready to get started, we do hope that we've shown you a tremendous menu of resources, and they're not mutually exclusive. Oh, my slides are changing for some reason. I think we built in a piece there, so I'll just talk. So reach out to us. I think you'll see that Eleni and I have we sent you the contact information for everybody, and we want you to be in touch with us at the end. Before we do end, I do need to acknowledge our partners that have been able to sponsor EDGE, especially the UK government, which is funding the MAGIC program. And we very much thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your interest in EDGE, and we hope you will join us in transforming the construction markets globally. Let me open it up again to questions. Remember that this webinar was recorded. The slides will be sent out hopefully in a matter of hours, as well as the recording. And then once we are done with the recording, we're going to post it on our EDGE channel as well, on the EDGE YouTube channel.
Thanks, Rusmir. I think while you open up questions, I'll summarize the 3 menu of options. That, always gonna love a little bit of technical fun as we do these webinars.
I can do it this way.
Okay, perfect. I would just say, yeah. So the 3 menus of options is almost as Rusmir was saying, they're not mutually exclusive, and so there's different places you can start depending on what resources you have, where you are today, and where you see your biggest market needs. But you can start with a complete no investment option of working with this technical framework with Sintali-SGS, which again is around building the education, building the market awareness, and then simply passing off clients when it's time to get that certificate to use that as compliance to Sintali-SGS, and we can work with them to help them get that certificate for you to distribute funds, all the way through to building in incentives, whether those are the preferential rates, whether that is some kind of subsidy on the certificational process, around EDGE expert support consultancy, all the way through to the IFC investment, which has an all-inclusive suite with the MAGIC funding if you're working in those countries, or working with the advisory, working with the investment team, and really getting access to a variety of different ways that can help you launch green real estate. None of these are mutually exclusive, but there's really an option for everybody depending on where you can start today, and you can always build out. But I think, as we pointed out, there's such a tremendous opportunity in green buildings that it's really the time to start is now.
Great. And again, to to reiterate, today we showed you resources for investors going to the market. IFC can invest in other private sector banks. We ourselves cannot invest if you are a development bank or a public bank, but our World Bank Group partners can. So we do have differentiated resources for developers, investors, public institutions, governments, and others. One of the great questions that came was, how can central banks do this work? And we actually have quite an amazing program for governments. We do, as much as we have banking pages, we also have government pages on our EDGE website that shows you not only what's possible, but also what others have done. So an example is in Indonesia, the central bank has reduced the requirement for down deposit for green mortgages. And I believe it went from 15% to 10%. So you can imagine that extra 5% has made an entire new kind of slot of people. It made it more affordable for them to purchase a green home. Whether that green home has more additional cost or in many cases not, it increases their purchasing power. In Bangladesh, the central bank is passing on incentivized loans to their banks for industrial, and both of those examples are on there. But we actually think some of these policy requirements around down deposit for green mortgages is one of the best places that people can start. One of the questions came through around real estate portfolio evaluation and risk modeling currently in use. So Lenny, you can maybe talk about the portfolio offer and as well as what sectors EDGE covers.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the easy question. So EDGE pretty much covers any building you can imagine. The only areas where it becomes difficult is a heavy industry use. So a building that's using so much energy that no matter how efficient it is, it's insignificant. So if you think about a very heavy, high energy process, like creating bricks or cement or an oil and gas facility, that would not be covered in EDGE. But other than that, it covers all types of retail, warehousing, education, hospitals, residential, hospitality, student accommodation. Really, pretty much any building you can think of is covered in EDGE. Data centers is really quite an exciting tool. In terms of the portfolio approach, so Sintali-SGS is very focused on making portfolio scale certification accessible. And we're actually working with a variety of different portfolios around the world. We've got warehousing portfolios, we have residential portfolios, we have student accommodation portfolios, we have large retail portfolios. And here we're talking about hundreds of buildings all the way through to thousands of buildings. And the way that we're able to do this scale is really by focusing and working with the clients and identifying efficiencies of scale. So really looking at where can we find similarities in the designs, how can we implement sampling approaches, and we work alongside IFC as well to do this and really find the best way possible. But as I've mentioned, we do have clients around the world that are doing this, and it's been very successful, both in terms of the time needed. And oftentimes portfolio certification sounds horrifying to anyone that's worked in the green building space because of typically the time and effort associated with just getting one building certified. But because of the EDGE app and the way that the process is streamlined, in addition to our portfolio approach, it's completely doable, and it's not going to take you 50 people working on your green building portfolio certification to get it done. And then, of course, that also translates into cost savings as well. So it's really quite a powerful and interesting tool for companies that have portfolios of buildings. And of course, the value that you get from financing, from looking at portfolios is even higher. And we've had many clients access a variety of different financial instruments through portfolio certification.
Great. There was a couple of questions around the presence of EDGE in certain countries. So for example, UK and Australia. EDGE was started as an emerging markets tool, but we have slowly been spreading, and by January of 2021, this will be a fully global tool. So it'll be available anywhere in the world, and there's quite a benefit there. We already are available in Europe, Australia, US, other parts of the world will be available, we hope in January when we launch our version 3.
Mm-hmm. And we actually have quite a few projects in Europe. So there's
Exactly.
definitely a lot of movement within EDGE in the warehouse, in the retail, getting a few residential projects currently in the UK. So there's definitely a movement in Europe.
Great. And a lot of questions around kind of country programs, and I believe that some of the books I mentioned, Kenya and Mexico, for example. So I feel I have failed if you don't know that EDGE has a program there, because I personally traveled to both of those countries. We have tremendous relationships with the real estate associations, with the the chapter of the World Rebuilding Council, so in the particular country. So SUME in Mexico, KGBS in Kenya. And in Kenya, actually, the government has made social housing mandated the acceptance of the EDGE standard. So for a project to be able to be acceptable for social housing, it has to reach the minimum EDGE standard, but in return, the government will give free land to that particular project. So this is one way that we are promoting affordable housing, because we don't believe that housing can be affordable if the utilities are very, very high. If the program does not exist and there's no certified project in your country, it likely means that we haven't started there. Because IFC, we have about 30 people working on EDGE around the world. What we want to do with you is that step number one that Eleni mentioned, reach out to us. We can do the workshop for you. Peru, there were no projects looking for EDGE. When we were done with awareness, there were hundreds of projects looking to do EDGE. So the awareness and the right partnership is absolutely what's needed. A couple of other questions came around cost savings. And again, today was not really an EDGE introduction. There's a lot more resources available for this online, but I'll give you a few things that we have captured in our Green Buildings report. And again, you'll see it in the links to the slides. We have shown that for most construction, to reach the EDGE standard can be as little as 1% or less incremental cost. And in many times, the incremental cost is zero. So in housing, that means that with an EDGE differentiation, you can sell your property faster. We have examples from Vietnam, where the developer has told us that at less than 1% incremental cost, they were able to increase their sales 3 times for their project. And again, another Financial Times, they were actually a winner. So they got a tremendous marketing. This is Capital House in Vietnam. In other times, if you're an owner of the property, you can utilize the utility savings. So we've had examples, for example, in hotels in Mexico, at zero incremental cost, they were able to identify $87,000 in savings. So utility bills are going to continue to rise. And because EDGE gives you a financial calculator, you will be able to understand what is my upfront cost and how quickly will I be able to pay that back. Or if I am, if I am selling the property, how can I differentiate myself and sell that to somebody else in the market? So I think that's one great question. Lots of questions came around how can mortgage institutions work on this? And IFC did actually do a training with some mortgage refinance companies through the World Bank Group, and we're happy to do more. So it's really a question of reach out to us. There can be different levels of these trainings. It's really just around a market creation effort in the end. So we're definitely happy to help you out. We're going to run out of time a little bit, but we can stay for about 5 more minutes. If you have to go, we won't be offended. But a lot of great questions came, so I thought that we can talk about it. Let's see, Andres has talked about how could you make the benefits much more visible so that all the interested parties know them and the things that happen in more sustainable projects can be built. We've launched a report on this. It's sort of the business case for green buildings. We have done then sister documents when it comes to, for example, hotels. So all of that is available on the EDGE website, and we try to really build a case study of different projects. Maybe I can show you our website so you can see that information.
I think there's also, when you pull that up, the developer section has all these tangible examples that are really, really helpful when you're talking to clients, because you can have the data at your fingertips.
Exactly. So what Eleni is mentioning is that we have lots of great case studies, from specific. These are all examples from specific people. So, quicker sales cycle. This is that Capital House example I showed you. You can see that what we did with them, I think we have a picture somewhere here. What we did with them is we helped them create a model apartment to be able to then sell that particular property. In a commercial building, it's about tenant capacity or higher commercial rates. So we're really documenting this information, and then IFC is doing this not just as a one-off kind of anecdotal evidence, but as a systematic analysis of the green buildings market. This is that banking information that we mentioned. So these are the bank pages with, again, lots of case studies of why you as an investor may want to be doing this work. So from accessing new sources of finance, recognition, lower investment risks than others. And then this is the link to all of the different incentives that are taking place. And then finally, for our colleagues who have come on the government side, again, we have both a menu of options for governments looking to do these incentives. So this is here, 10 ways to encourage green building growth, all the way down to specific case studies from both, I mentioned, Bangladesh, done by the central bank, Indonesia should be here. This again was a central bank one, to different municipalities that have done non-fiscal incentives and have been very, very useful. So the EDGE website is there, and we're hoping that we have all of this information with you to share. Let's see. Couple of other questions around PPPs. Again, so there's a public-private partnerships, and we can, again, partner with you and do that promotion. We've done it in places like Kenya. We know in Nigeria, there's a PPP, Brazil, where, again, the government is incentivizing some of this work, maybe through free land or other incentives, and then is able to do other work. So Sintali's offer is to work, I'd say, with any institution, no matter what. Let's see. I think those are the questions that I have answered. One of the questions actually did come was, has the EDGE certification an impact on the loan conditions? And what hopefully you saw from the PowerPoint is that many of our partners are either requiring EDGE for incentivized work, or at least offering an incentive in terms of the technical assistance. So for some incentives, then the EDGE is a requirement to go there. It is not necessarily the only one. Some of our partners do accept other certification mechanisms such as LEED, BREEAM, Green Star, but we think that we truly have an end-to-end offer when it comes to EDGE. And again, the EDGE tool itself is free. There's that self-assessment option that they can utilize for free, and it gives them the ability to understand upfront costs and then calculate the utility cost savings. I think these are all the questions I had. So we will close at this point. I just want to copy this. You'll see when we close the webinar, you will go to this website. Please know it's not a spam. We're not trying to do anything. It's just a survey on our work. So when you close out today, it will take you to that particular page. But I want to thank everybody, and I'll give the last word to Eleni, who kind of brought the brunt of the presentation, and she's going to do the brunt of the work to give you parting words.
Thanks, Rusmir. Thank you all so much for attending. I think, from my side, there's so much happening in the green building space, and there's so much work still to be done for us to really tackle the climate crisis and decarbonize society by 2050 at the utmost latest. So really getting the work done and implementing these programs now can really help accelerate the deployment of capital. And ultimately, we all know that where there's finance, there's change. And so really all the investors, no matter who you are and where you sit, you have the power to really implement and change the way that we do business and really help accelerate green buildings. So I would urge you, take a look at the menu of options, go through the PowerPoint again, get some ideas, reach out to us to have further conversation, and let's get you started on putting together a green real estate program and working in your market. Great.
Thank you so much, Eleni. I will finish the recording for today. I'll leave the Q&A and the webinar running in case you have follow-up questions, and then you will hear from us, and we'll have our emails and can touch base. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.